Welcome to the world of science fiction stories, and don't forget to like, share and subscribe my channel. Enjoy the listening. Earth was just another target, until humanity made them regret it. The sky over New York City burned red as the first wave of alien warships descended through the atmosphere. They came without warning, without diplomacy, only destruction. Within hours, Earth's major cities crumbled under the sheer might of an enemy unlike anything humanity had ever faced. The invaders called themselves the Valkyr, a ruthless interstellar empire that had conquered hundreds of worlds. To them, Earth was nothing more than another nameless rock to be subjugated. They miscalculated. Jake Carter stood in the wreckage of his old neighborhood, gripping an assault rifle he had scavenged from a fallen soldier. He had been a mechanic before all this, just another guy trying to pay rent and avoid the endless grind. Now, like everyone else who had survived the first days of the invasion, he was a soldier, whether he wanted to be or not. The Valkyr had underestimated humanity, assuming Earth would surrender as so many before them had, but they didn't understand what it meant to fight humans. They didn't understand the rage that built inside those who had lost everything. Jake crouched behind an overturned car as a squad of Valkyr foot soldiers marched through the ruins of what had once been a grocery store. They were tall, skeletal creatures, their exoskeleton-like armor gleaming in the firelight. Their black eyes scanned for movement, their plasma rifles humming with deadly energy. A whisper crackled in his stolen radio. "Carter, we've got a chance to take them. You in?" Jake recognized the voice. Reyna Vasquez, a former Marine who had taken charge of their ragtag resistance group. She had lost her entire family in the first wave, and now she fought like a woman with nothing left to lose. "Damn right I'm in," Jake murmured, tightening his grip on the rifle. A quick, sharp whistle cut through the air, a signal. Jake rolled out from cover and opened fire. The first shot took one of the Valkyr straight in the head, sending it sprawling backward. The others barely had time to react before the resistance fighters rained bullets and explosives upon them. It wasn't clean. The Valkyr had superior technology, but humans had something else: ingenuity, unpredictability, and sheer, unrelenting fury. The battle was over in seconds, and as the smoke cleared, Reyna jogged up beside Jake, her face streaked with dirt and blood. "We're taking the fight to them," she said, eyes burning with determination. "No more hiding, no more running. They want our planet. Let's make them regret ever setting foot here." Jake exhaled, glancing up at the warships looming overhead. He knew Reyna was right. Humanity wasn't just going to survive this war, they were going to make the Valkyr wish they had never heard of Earth. "Let's do it," he said. The resistance was growing across the globe. Pockets of humanity were pushing back against the invaders with whatever they had: stolen alien weapons, homemade explosives, even sharpened steel. The Valkyr had expected an easy conquest. Instead, they found themselves locked in a war they had never anticipated. Jake and Reyna led their small unit through the skeletal remains of New York City, dodging patrols and scavenging supplies. The old world was gone, its towering buildings now crumbling monuments to a civilization that refused to die quietly. The Valkyr controlled the skies, but the streets belonged to the resistance. They reached an abandoned subway station, one of the many hideouts where survivors regrouped and planned their next moves. As they descended into the underground tunnels, dozens of faces turned toward them, worn, exhausted, but not broken. There were engineers, medics, and former soldiers, all of them working together to keep the resistance alive. At the center of it all was an older man bent over a table cluttered with maps, electronic devices, and stolen Valkyr tech. General Elias Monroe, once a respected leader in the U.S. military, now the de facto commander of what remained of Earth's fighting force. Monroe looked up as Reyna and Jake approached. "I assume you didn't come back empty-handed." Jake tossed a plasma rifle onto the table. "More toys for the cause." Monroe grunted in approval. "Good. We'll need every advantage we can get." He turned to a screen displaying a grainy, static-filled feed. It showed a massive Valkyr warship hovering over what had once been Washington, D.C. We've intercepted transmissions. The Valkyr High Command is stationed on that ship. If we take it out, we send a message to the entire fleet. Reyna folded her arms. You're talking about attacking a command ship? With what exactly? Monroe smirked. We've been working on that. He gestured toward the corner of the room where a group of scientists huddled around what looked like a stripped-down Valkyr drone. We've managed to reprogram one of their own machines. If we can get it inside that warship, we can detonate their power core from within. Jake exhaled sharply. That's one hell of a plan. Desperate times, Carter, Monroe said. But we need people to get that drone into position. Reyna cracked her knuckles. Then we better get moving. The mission was madness, a suicide run, but Jake didn't hesitate. The Valkyr had taken everything from them. Now it was time to take something back. The night was thick with smoke and the scent of burned metal as Jake and Reyna moved through the ruins, their team close behind. The plan was simple: get the hacked drone close enough to the command ship security grid, let it slip inside, and watch as the whole thing turned into a funeral pyre. Simple didn't mean easy. The city was crawling with patrols. Valkyr foot soldiers moved in tight formations, their insect-like heads swiveling as they scanned the streets. Drones hummed above, searching for heat signatures. The resistance had learned how to avoid them, keeping to the shadows, moving when the enemy wasn't looking. Jake's heart pounded as they crouched behind an overturned bus. A squad of Valkyr marched past, their glowing blue visors casting eerie light against the rubble. One wrong move, one stray noise, and it was over. Reyna gave a silent signal, wait. Jake gritted his teeth, keeping his breathing steady. He could feel the weight of the stolen Valkyr rifle in his hands. Human weapons were becoming useless, bullets barely scratched their armor anymore. Plasma was the only thing that worked, and even that took precision. The aliens moved on, their strange clicking language fading into the distance. Go, Reyna whispered. They moved fast, weaving between broken buildings and abandoned vehicles. The hacked drone floated behind them. It was no bigger than a basketball, its surface pulsing with stolen Valkyr technology. Monroe's team had spent weeks cracking its code, turning it against its creators. If it worked, the war would change in an instant. If it failed, they would all be dead before sunrise. They reached the outskirts of the drop zone. The command ship loomed above them, a massive obsidian fortress suspended in the sky. Beams of light scanned the ground, searching for threats. Jake clenched his jaw. The resistance had managed to get this close before, but no one had ever come back. Reyna tapped her earpiece. Monroe, we're in position. Static, then his voice. Copy that. Sending the signal. The drone shuddered, its lights flickered, then stabilized. A soft hum filled the air as it activated its cloaking field. Jake watched as it became a shimmer in the darkness, nearly invisible. Go, baby, Reyna whispered. The drone shot forward, slipping through the security grid. They held their breath as it disappeared into the ship's underbelly. Jake wiped sweat from his brow. Now what? Monroe's voice came through the calm, now we pray to whatever gods we have left. Minutes crawled by. Then the alarm started. The warship's lights flickered, its thrusters sputtering. The Valkyr below stopped in confusion, their weapons raised. Something was wrong. And then a deep, rumbling explosion ripped through the air. The sky lit up as fire burst from the command ship's core. The ground trembled beneath them as the mighty vessel lurched, its structure collapsing inward. The Valkyr on the ground screamed in their strange alien tongues as their flagship came crashing down. The resistance had just killed a god. Jake felt a surge of triumph as flames engulfed the wreckage. The Valkyr fleet had just learned a lesson: Earth was not an easy conquest. They came to conquer, but now they would bleed. Reyna grabbed Jake's arm, her eyes wild with victory. They'll never forget this. Jake nodded, watching the burning sky. Never. The shock wave from the fallen warship roared through the ruins, sending debris flying and knocking Jake onto his back. His ears rang from the explosion, and for a moment, all he could hear was muffled chaos. Smoke filled the air, turning the night into a churning battlefield of fire and shadow. Reyna grabbed his arm, pulling him to his feet. We have to move. Jake blinked, trying to clear his vision. The command ship was gone, reduced to a smoldering wreck, but the fight wasn't over. If anything, it had just begun. The Valkyr were in disarray, their once organized squads stumbling through the rubble, their formations broken, their communications scrambled. Some fired blindly, their usual precision lost in the confusion. Others stood frozen, watching their mighty warship burn, unable to comprehend what had just happened. Monroe's voice crackled through their earpieces. You did it. Holy hell, you actually did it. Jake grinned through the exhaustion. Damn right we did. Now get the hell out of there before they regroup, Monroe ordered. Reyna was already moving, her rifle raised as she signaled the others. The resistance fighters emerged from cover, pressing the advantage. Plasma fire streaked through the night as humans cut down the disoriented aliens. They weren't just fighting to survive anymore, they were fighting to win. Jake fired at a Valkyr soldier scrambling for cover, hitting it square in the chest. The creature screeched, its exoskeleton splitting apart as it collapsed. More of them fell as the resistance fighters surged forward, relentless in their assault. For the first time since the invasion began, the Valkyr were the ones running. But they weren't beaten yet. A distant, inhuman roar echoed through the ruins, deep and guttural. Jake turned toward the sound, his stomach twisting. From the smoke, massive figures emerged, Valkyr enforcers. They were bigger than the regular foot soldiers, heavily armored and wielding weapons that could tear through concrete. Reyna cursed. They're bringing in the heavies. Jake's grip on his rifle tightened. Guess they're pissed. The enforcers raised their weapons, blue energy crackling along their arms. The ground beneath them hissed as their boots melted through the pavement. These weren't just soldiers, they were executioners. We can't take them head-on, Reyna said, eyes darting for an escape route. Jake knew she was right. They had scored a major victory, but this wasn't the final battle. If they stayed, they would be wiped out. Monroe's voice came through again. Fall back to the tunnels. Now. Reyna grabbed Jake's arm, dragging him toward the nearest alley. The resistance fighters followed, ducking between wreckage as the enforcers opened fire. Energy blasts tore through the ruins, turning solid stone into molten slag. Jake ran, his breath ragged, his muscles screaming. Behind them, the enforcers moved with terrifying precision, relentless and cold. But the resistance knew these streets better. They cut through alleys, jumped over broken walls, and finally reached an old sewer entrance. The metal grate had been blown open long ago, leading into the underground tunnels. Go, go, go. Reyna shouted. One by one, the fighters dropped into the darkness. Jake was the last to go, his heart pounding as he slid into the tunnel just as another blast struck the ground above. The explosion shook the earth, sending dust and debris raining down. Silence followed. They had escaped, barely. Jake caught his breath, leaning against the damp tunnel wall. Around him, the others did the same, their faces streaked with sweat and soot. Reyna ran a hand through her hair, her expression unreadable. Monroe's voice came through once more, quieter this time. You all did good. We hit them where it hurts. Jake exhaled. They had taken down a command ship. They had made the Valkyr bleed. But the war wasn't over. Not yet. The tunnel stretched into the darkness, damp and claustrophobic. The air was thick with the smell of rust and stagnant water, but down here, they were safe for now. Jake leaned against the wall, still catching his breath. His body ached from running, from fighting, from surviving. The others around him were in the same state, exhausted but alive. They had struck a blow the Valkyr wouldn't soon forget, but it had cost them. "We lost Reynolds," one of the fighters, Marco, muttered. "He didn't make it to the tunnels." Reyna clenched her jaw, nodding slowly. She didn't say anything, but the pain in her eyes said enough. Jake swallowed hard. They had lost people before, too many to count, but it never got easier, and it never would. Monroe's voice came through their earpieces again, quieter this time. "You did good out there, but listen up. We have a bigger problem." Jake glanced at Reyna. "Bigger than taking down their command ship?" Monroe hesitated. That alone was enough to send a chill through Jake's spine. Then the old soldier said, "We've been monitoring their transmissions. After what you pulled tonight, they're bringing in reinforcements. A lot of them." Silence filled the tunnel. Reyna was the first to break it. "How bad?" Monroe sighed. "Bad enough that if we don't move fast, there won't be a resistance left to fight." Jake ran a hand over his face. Of course they had expected retaliation, but this was something else. The Valkyr weren't just regrouping, they were preparing to wipe humanity off the map. Marco kicked a piece of rubble. "So what do we do? Keep running?" Reyna straightened. "No. We hit them first." Jake raised an eyebrow. "You want to go right at them?" She nodded. "We have no choice. If they're bringing in reinforcements, that means supply lines, landing zones, command centers. We hit them before they can fully mobilize." Monroe hummed over the radio. "Reyna, that's insane." "Maybe," she admitted. "But it's our only shot." Jake exhaled slowly. It was reckless, suicidal even, but it was also exactly what the Valkyr wouldn't expect. "All right," he said. "Where do we start?" Reyna smirked. "We take the fight to their main supply base. We cut them off before they even get a chance to strike." Jake grinned despite the exhaustion. He could almost hear Monroe shaking his head. "All right, Carter," Monroe muttered. "Looks like you just signed up for another suicide mission." Jake chuckled, gripping his rifle. "Wouldn't be the first." As the resistance fighters prepared for what was to come, one thing was clear: Earth wasn't just defending itself anymore. It was going on the attack. The resistance fighters moved swiftly through the underground tunnels, their boots splashing through shallow pools of stagnant water. The plan was reckless, borderline suicidal, but that was exactly why it would work. The Valkyr were expecting humanity to run, to hide, to scatter in fear. Instead, they were going to strike first. Reyna led the way, her plasma rifle slung across her back, her posture tense. Jake walked beside her, occasionally glancing back at the rest of the group. They were all exhausted, running on little more than adrenaline and sheer spite, but no one hesitated. Everyone here had lost too much to stop now. Monroe's voice crackled through the comms. "You're about 3 clicks from the target. Intel suggests the Valkyr have set up a primary supply depot at the old JFK airport. That's where they're stockpiling weapons, fuel, and reinforcements. We hit it hard and we slow them down." Jake smirked. "Sounds simple enough." "It never is," Monroe shot back.